As is customary with transfer windows, we get an awful lot of talk, an awful lot of speculation, an awful lot of rumor, an awful lot of fans being wound up when we see so many stories being petered out and nothing happening. And we get frustrated, don't we? You know, we all know that we need players, or do we need players in the squad in order to make it stronger? And yet we're halfway through the January transfer window and nothing's materializing. Now, we know we've got injuries to the squad. Many fans are saying and are arguing that we absolutely must build on the squad that we have in order to have a decent second half of the season. And that's not the wrong thing to say. We remember the 21-22 season, the January transfer window, then when we were still in the Europa League at the time and doing rather well in the Premier League, much like we're doing at the moment. And all we needed was maybe one or two signings in order to try and boost the squad, in order to try and give us that push that we needed in the second half of the season. But of course, we didn't sign anyone 2 years ago. And many fans will rightly believe, absolutely believe, that the lack of signings back in that window was the reason why we didn't get to beat Eintracht Frankfurt in the semi-final of the Europa League, and we didn't just quite make it in the league in order to get Champions League qualification. So what about now? I mean, look, we've got injuries. Let's start with those very briefly, because it's not so bad, not as bad as we were led to believe. And first of all, Jared Bowen, apparently, who was rumored to be out for something like 2 months with the ankle injury that he's picked up, is apparently not so bad. And the injury looks like maybe a couple of more weeks, and he could be set for a return for the game against Bournemouth on the 1st of February. Now, if you recall, I was suggesting last week, it depends on the kind of level of injury that Bowen would have picked up. If it was something like a level one, grade one injury, that's likely to be 3 weeks, maybe four maximum. If it was level two, it could be a couple of months. Level three would be a full ligament tear, and that would have been several months out. So it looks like, with all the speculation that's been flying around, as I mentioned last week, the swelling was quite severe, and the couldn't take any scans of the injury. But now that swelling's gone down, and it looks apparently that he's not too bad, and he should be back for the Bournemouth game. So if he's back, it means he's only going to miss the replay against Bristol City on Tuesday night and the league game against Sheffield United this coming Sunday. Of course, if we win the replay, there'll be another game in the Cup against either Nottingham Forest or Blackpool. But I don't think Bowen would have been selected for that game anyway. Well, I don't know. But at this moment in time, if he is going to return around about the beginning of February, he'll only miss one league game and obviously the replay and potentially the fourth round FA Cup run. So that's not too bad. And if he does come back sooner rather than later, that would rest a few minds at ease, put a few minds at ease in terms of maybe not needing to go out and rushing to get another player. Now, there are other players that I'm going to talk about in a moment that we might need replacing. But when it comes to Bowen, it doesn't look like it will be that bad. Then, of course, we heard last week. If you remember, I was doing a show last week, and I was getting messages in the chat, and everyone was saying, "Well, you got it wrong about Mavropanos. He's got cracked ribs. It's all over the social media." And I was like, checking with my sources and saying it's not what I've heard. And thankfully, lo and behold, he hasn't got cracked ribs. It was just bruising because he's already back training with the rest of the squad. So it's good. Now, He possibly will be available for the game against Bristol City on Tuesday night. Does he want to be roughed up again by Championship players? That I don't know. But it's good that Mavropanos is back, because that sort of allays a few fears with our defence. And then, of course, the curious case of Lucas Paqueta. Well, you would have seen a couple of photos and videos and stuff like that of him on social media over the past few days. One of them was that Paqueta had like a compression pack or an ice pack around his leg. And another one, apparently he had that pack on while he was watching the game between Everton and Aston Villa. And then there was a video that was out, I think on Sunday, that showed him back in training in the gym with no pack at all. So it looks like he's back, but not too soon, because he will be probably available as well as just like Bowen. He'll probably be available for the game against Bournemouth on the 1st of February. So it doesn't look like it was as bad as we all thought. Apparently, another player that was going to be out for 2 months, but doesn't seem to be so. Now, with Paqueta, the pack and everything, it's a standard thing. It's a normal part of the healing process. You put ice on an injury. If it's not too bad, he had a specialist come over, if you remember, to double check on the injury. And clearly, but just by having ice on it and then compression packs, etc., to heal the injury, looks to be all that he needs to do. And also, like all injuries, you get graded: grade 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, grade 1 not being the worst, and then grade 3 being the most severe. The grade 1 injury would mean that he would have movement. Hence, the video that he did showing him in training. Okay, it was upper arm training, upper body training, but he was still training, still being able to move, etc., which suggests that he's not going to be that far away from returning to action as well. So that's good too. And then we move on, of course, to Mohamed Kudus. Now we know he's out now. He's joined the Ghanaian team for the AFCON, and there was big fears, wasn't there? Last week, there was a friendly against Namibia that Ghana drew 0-0, and we thought that he might be used for that game, and thankfully he wasn't. And then, of course, the first game of the AFCON that Ghana played was against Cape Verde on Sunday, but he wasn't selected for that either, and there was a big fear that he might be brought back too soon. Now, unfortunately, Ghana lost that game 2-1. Which puts them at the bottom of their group. Now, their next game is against Egypt. Egypt drew against Mozambique 2-2 on the same day. So that means Ghana's at the bottom of the table. And there might be that temptation to bring him back for the next game against Egypt in order to try and save Ghana's AFCON process. Because if they lose against Egypt, they're more or less out of the competition, with the final game in that competition being the following Monday, and he could be back by the middle of next week. Now, look, he's been suffering from a slight hamstring injury. It's good that Ghana haven't taken a risk with him. But obviously, the medical team, the Ghanaian medical team, have done right by him, because the last thing that you want is for Kudus to be brought into too quickly back into action, like Paqueta was when we played him in the game against Bristol City. And that could make the injury worse than what it might be. It's a slight hamstring, is what we've been told. He's back in training, but not quite ready to play a game. Let's see what happens when Egypt play Ghana in the next game later on this week. But it's possible that there's every chance that he could be back probably in time for the game against either Nottingham Forest or Blackpool, which is the weekend after next. So around about the 27th, 28th of January. That's if Ghana lose and go out of the competition. So we've got a few players, and it's not such bad news. You look at Paqueta, you look at Bowen, you look at Mavropanos, and potentially Kudus. They could all be back by the end of this month. So do we really need to strengthen in the January window? Well, we already know that we've lost a couple of players in the senior squad. Thilo Kehrer, his move at the beginning of the window to Monaco. And it was also quite sad to have seen lifelong hammer Conor Coventry leaving the club at the weekend as well. He's signed on a permanent basis for Charlton Athletic. We wish him well. It just hasn't worked out for Conor Coventry. He's been with the club since the age of 10, 13 years. There was hope. He got his chance under Pellegrini, but then, chances were few and far between after that for the young player. And I really hope he does well and proves us all wrong. This is what we want academy players to do, don't we? To sort of go away, build a career for themselves and demonstrate that we should have had more faith in them. But now with Conor Coventry going, we're going to have to start thinking when it comes to the transfer window, we're going to have to start thinking about homegrown players. Because as it stands right now, we've only got 7 homegrown players. Now, what that includes Divin Mbama, who we don't have to include. He's in the squad, but we don't have to include him. So we've got to think about if we're going to be replacing him in this window, or even if in the summer, we've got to be thinking about homegrown players. Now, a few players that would actually be suitable homegrowns include the likes of Max Kilman, Jonathan Rowe, Jack Clarke, and Trevoh Chalobah of Chelsea. But in the meantime, we've still got to decide who else, or well, not us, but the manager and West Ham United have still got to decide who else might be leaving in this window. There is still rumours that Ben Johnson is likely to leave in this window, with Leeds United and Rangers in Scotland showing interest in the player. But that would be another homegrown player out the door. And apparently, Crystal Palace have lodged an interest in Danny Ings. And that would mean yet another homegrown player leaving the club. That would mean that we'd be down by 3 homegrown players, with Conor Coventry having already left. Now, if we want a squad the size of 25, that means of the 25, we've got to bring 3 players in who are going to be homegrown. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now, I think quite possibly that we're not going to see all these players leaving in this window. I think David Moyes is going to have to sort of reverse his thinking as to what he needs. Now, there are other players, not necessarily homegrown, that there's still a big question mark over. Aguerd, apparently, we still haven't received any bids for him, but we won't stand in his way if we get a £30 million bid. Now, if we get a £30 million bid, then of course we can go in for Max Kilman, paying that extra 10 million for 26-year-old Kilman, who's having a superb season with Wolverhampton Wanderers, would be a perfect move. Not only would we be getting a player probably more suited to West Ham's style of play than Aguerd is, but also, yet again, filling that homegrown ranking. But nothing's happening yet. As much as we're saying that players like Aguerd can go, if there are no bids, then it's likely he's going to have to stay until the summer. Now, the other problem is, of course, Wolves may not want to sell Max Kilman. So therefore, if we do get a bid for him and let him go, then I think Chalobah could be a very, very potential signing on loan for the rest of the season. Now, okay, I talked about him last week, and I've said he hasn't kicked a ball this season because of injury, but he's back, and he's back training. And apparently he's not in the plans for Chelsea under their manager, Pochettino. And it's very, very possible that Chalobah will be looking for a move, maybe on loan just for the time being. And why not West Ham? There may be some interest for him abroad as well. But I wonder how much Chalobah wants to prove himself in the Premier League. He's a pretty decent centre-back. And again, a homegrown talent. So I think quite possibly, if we do get a bid for Aguerd and we can't get Max Kilman in this window, then Chalobah would be probably a decent alternative. And then, of course, we got the issue with Benrahma. I talked last week about he refused to play for West Ham in the FA Cup round against Bristol City, but he's back in training. But for how long? How long will he be around for? There is interest in the player from France. Lyon apparently have a big interest in him, but there's also interest in from Premier League clubs. And of course, he put up that video on his Instagram the other day of a goal he scored for Brentford. Will he be going back there? Will it be interesting? Because if we do sell him, and it's quite possible that if we do move any other player on at this moment in time, it could well be Benrahma. But then who would come in for him? Well, we've got two players that we are apparently highly interested in, and they are Jonathan Rowe of Norwich City and, of course, Jack Clarke, who I mentioned last week of Sunderland. Now, both have had personally, they had very good weekends, both scoring very, very decent goals for their respective teams. Sunderland, of course, they lost against Ipswich, but they both demonstrated their worth for their respective teams at the weekend. But when we look at them a little bit more carefully, who's had the better season so far? Well, interestingly, Jonathan Rowe, I think, is a bit of a crowd pleaser. It's his first full season at Norwich, and he's almost definitely going to improve year on from now on. But at the moment, Jack Clarke is the one that's having the better season. He scored a few more goals, 13 to Rowe's 11, which is not too bad at all. This is in the league. But Clarke has had more shots on target, more accuracy. He's had better chances, created double the number of chances that Rowe has, better pass accuracy, better take on success, etc. So you can see at the moment, it's Clarke that is the better player at this moment in time. 23 years of age, Jack Clarke. 23 years of age, Jack Clarke, right-footed, prefers to play out on the left. This is an area that we need to replay. We need to strengthen on, especially if Benrahma does leave. And could he emulate? He's being considered as the next Jarrod Bowen, coming from the Championship and playing in the Premier League. Now, all right, he was with Spurs before he moved to Sunderland. Didn't quite work out for him. But this season, as I've said, he's thriving with 13 goals. He's valued at around about 20 odd million pounds, which he won't be beyond West Ham United. He's got the added bonus that last season he started well. He scored 11 goals in all competitions last season. And this season, he's demonstrated that it wasn't a one-season wonder. He's actually improved. Now, what about Rowe? Well, Rowe is, like I said, he's a raw talent. He's only going to get better and better at the age of 20. Moyes may just consider him, though, to be just a little bit too young to come in and make a difference in the side. I know what you all think about that. But he currently represents England at under 21 level. He is a crowd pleaser. If you saw the goal that he scored at the weekend, it was an excellently taken goal. And you can see that he loves his football. Who wouldn't love their football? But like I said, I don't know. Of the two, if you want someone that's going to maybe hit the ground running a bit quicker than in order to replace someone like Benrahma, then I would think Jack Clarke would be the player to do that. The good thing about both of them is they're both versatile players, both Rowe and Clarke. They both Clarke primarily likes to play out on the left-hand side. They're both right-footed, but they can play along that front line in the centre, out on the right, out on the left. So they're versatile in that sense. And they're both young. Clarke is 23, Rowe is 20. So I think that if there's any business to be done at this moment in time, it won't necessarily be in defence, because I don't think if we don't get the bid that we want for Aguerd, he won't be going. 50-50 on Ben Johnson, whether he leaves or not, or we might have to bite the bullet and allow him to leave for nothing at the end of the season. That's if we can't get him to sign a new contract at West Ham. There have been attempts to do so. So I'm not so sure that there's going to be a lot of movement in defence. But when it comes to attack, it's quite possible. Will Ings go as well as Benrahma? It's very possible. If we can get one of those players to replace those players, whether it be Rowe or Clarke, and I'm putting my money on Jack Clarke, then you might see some movement in the front line rather than in defence. Right, I'll be doing the West Ham Weekly later on this on Monday evening, so do watch out for that. It will be on, I don't know, after 9 o'clock sometime. So do, but please look out for that, and I'll see you all very, very soon.